You're very welcome along to attheraces.com. Our Cheltenham Festival continues. It is the Arkle Novices Chase on the Tuesday afternoon, our next port of call. Over 2 miles, and we'll be wondering whether Champagne Fever can do it again. Dan Barber's thoughts very shortly from Timeform, but first, some of the leading players.
With 2 to jump, Champagne Fever comes to it now in front of Marlbrook. Champagne Fever wasn't all that clever himself at that one, but they're on the run down now to the final fence, and Marlbrook is pressed by Corbally Ghost, who moves into second. So it's the 2 greys at the final fence. Champagne Fever over in front. Corbally Ghost is running on to good effect in second. Marlbrook is back in third, but up towards the finish, it's Champagne Fever is going to win the first novice chase in good style, all the way winner, and an opening treble for Ruby Walsh and Willie Mullins. Trifolium is trying to make ground. Art of Logistics and Ted Veal. 1 fence left to jump, and it's Defy Logic from Trifolium now making ground on the inside of Champagne Fever. Final fence now, and it's Defy Logic and Mark Walsh. Trifolium is now giving chase for Davy Russell. They're inside the last 200 yards, and it's Defy Logic and Mark Walsh holding Trifolium as they run up towards the finish. And it is Defy Logic will win the racing post for Paul Nolan, Mark Walsh, and JP McManus, who's had a great 15 minutes. But they're on the run for the final fence in the Frank Ward Solicitors Arkle Novice Chase, and it's Trifolium and Brian Cooper in the lead. From in second place, Muzzletoft, Paul Townend, Felix Younger towards the outside. Trifolium is over and clear. Muzzletoft and Felix Younger ahead of Ted Veal, who's moved into fourth. Defy Logic back in fifth, but it's Trifolium who's out in front and running up towards the finish. It's Trifolium who's put up a fine performance here to win the Frank Ward Solicitors Arkle Chase in great style. Trifolium and Brian Cooper win for Charles Burns in the Jigginstown colours.
Approaching 2 out, Rock on Ruby. Over it well, Mr. Mole not giving up. Is a length and a half down, a furlong and a half left to go, 1 to jump. Rock on Ruby, is he toying with Mr. Mole? Looks like it at the moment. Still 1 more fence left to cross. Rock on Ruby comes to it. Again, a very solid jump from in second position at Mr. Mole, and off up the running they come. Now Feely shakes the reins at the leader, Rock on Ruby, and he quickly draws clear by 3 to 4 lengths over Mr. Mole in second, who was second all the way. And he's come through his Cheltenham prep in pretty good style here, Rock on Ruby, and all roads lead to the festival.
The run down towards the last. Dennis O'Regan's asking for more from Arno. Valdez closing in, so too is Fox Appeal, and now Arno's legs are turning to jelly, and Valdez has claimed the lead on the run in. It is Valdez from Arno. Fox Appeal staying on down the outside. It's Valdez driven out in the hands of Jock Thornton. The Alan King Yard will land the Racing Post Lightning Novices Chase. It's a perfect 3 from 3 of offences. Valdez the winner.
So the Arkle Chase, can he possibly win again? Champagne Fever, of course, the horse we're talking about. Dan Barber from Timeform, the man with all of the answers. What do you think, Dan?
I think he's got the ability to win, of course he has. He's a dual festival winner already, and both of his best efforts in bumpers and over hurdles came when he peaked for the big day at Cheltenham in March. There are slight concerns about him, though, as far as I'm concerned. He's not been seen since Boxing Day. He's a horse who, it seems generally, has been pretty hard to keep sound, and he does have a few blobs on his record, doesn't he? But this was one of his better days. He makes a slight mistake at the second last, but he essentially outclasses the field as he was entitled to, and if Walsh can deliver the sort of masterclass he did on him 12 months ago in the Supreme Novices Hurdle, and the horse is 100%, then of course he could win, John. But at the current prices, I would be slightly happy to steer clear.
Well, that was delighted to see that on his debut, winning in front of our cameras at Punchestown. We then saw him, of course, at Christmas in the Racing Post Novice Chase. He was bowling along brilliantly with Defy Logic until this happened, approaching the home straight. It was quite a juddering mistake there, and he went backwards, and we've not seen him since, Dan.
No, it does make you wonder if something happened that day which has led to a setback, perhaps, and it was a bad mistake. I don't know whether it fully explains the fact that Walsh pushed him along brief entering the straight and then he's happy to ease him. It does raise doubts in my mind as to whether something did happen to him, but equally he's a horse who has found little previously. Conversely, on his good days he finds bundles for pressure, but here he had nothing left to give. Not been seen since. That's clearly concerning, and it's a shame we didn't get the chance to see what would have happened, because Defy Logic is the horse who pins together so much of this Irish novice chase form, and it was boiling down to a brilliant match between the pair when Champagne Fever did blunder. But at 3 to 1-ish, or whatever he is at the current time, you are taking a fair bit on trust, i.e. he's 100%, and that there's been nothing untoward in the 3 months since we last saw him.
And the picture perhaps, Dan, all the more confused when we put the focus on Trifolium, second there to Defy Logic, when Trifolium won the Irish Arkle and Defy Logic broke a blood vessel and ran poorly, disappearing out of touch. And of course Felix Younger is involved in this form as well. Yeah,
Defy Logic won't be seen for the remainder of the season. His problem was that serious by all accounts, but there's a case at times to say when the same horses are beating each other that it's a reflection of a below average crop, but I'm not sure it applies in this case. I think they are a good bunch, and I think the Irish novices in terms of bare form achieved are a step ahead of the British counterparts, and Trifolium was really hard to fault on this occasion. Yes, Defy Logic bombed out, and I'm not sure Felix Younger was 100% either, I've got to admit that, but equally he's got a very likeable way of going about it, and his sound jumping, which we've seen on all his starts, is something that will see him to great advantage in a race like the Arkle, where there genuinely is all sorts of pressure on that aspect of your game. The likes of Alpha Off in recent years have been knocked out of it by a mistake, and I think that's one thing you can rely upon Trifolium with, is to put in a clear round and for his jumping to prove an asset.
There could be a great story in this race, of course, with a former champion hurdler attempting to win the race. Rock On Ruby loves Cheltenham, we know. He's 2 from 2 over fences. He seems to have done precious little wrong, yet he seems to have slipped under the radar a little bit, Dan.
Yeah, it's a function of a general shift, I think, in the British novice chases, in that they are throwing up smallish fields, and it's not Rock On Ruby's fault that there's been little put in front of him, but he has done all that's been required. His jumping hasn't impressed everybody, though, and it hasn't always impressed me. I'd say he was better at Doncaster than first time out. It was disappointing to see him make mistakes at Plumpton, but yeah, he was better here. But what the bare form's actually worth is pretty hard to equate, and I think there are general doubts as to whether he's still the 170 horse that has been so good at Cheltenham in recent seasons. We're recalling winning the Champion. He ran a smashing race in it last season as well. But easy to back prior to reappearance at Kempton, put up little fight behind the new one, and then it was only then that they decided it seemed to switch him to chasing. So I think there is an element of doubt if we're now taking single figure prices as to whether he is the same force, and he'll need to be probably, and he'll also have to put in a clear round of jumping, which will be put under a far greater amount of pressure at Cheltenham than it has in beating 2 or 3 rivals in his previous starts.
So that was Rock On Ruby winning at Doncaster. Now more Doncaster form, the Lightning Novices Chase, won by the tenacious Valdez. Likeable horse. I think if he's in shouting distance, 2 out, he's going to be a big player because he does try hard.
He's got all the attributes of a horse that's going to go close in this race. He's a sound jumper. For a horse so inexperienced, I think that's been the most impressive aspect of his game so far. He absolutely wings the last this day. Arnaud had gone off pretty hard, but he'd essentially had the run of this race, and I'm more interested, to be honest, in Valdez based on his penultimate run. You see here at Doncaster, the 3rd horse, Fox Appeal, is essentially a 2.5 plus horse, really. The trip wasn't in his favour this day. But think back to what Valdez did at Newbury the time before. He absolutely smashed a handicap field in a time that compared really well with the established handicappers, led home by Filbert in the closing race. So on the clock, that was a big effort. And for those that backed him and saw him jump right at Newbury, it was encouraging at Doncaster that he kept a straight line, and again he's a very bold jumper, and jinking to the right slightly at Newbury is the only blemish he's had in that department of his game. I think he's a very exciting horse, and I think he's in danger of being slightly underrated because unlike Trifolium, unlike Champagne Fever, unlike Rock On Ruby, he hasn't been tested at these big festivals before, but that's not to say he isn't a horse with a very smart Timeform rating who has more to come as well.
Sounds like you're going to make another investment here, Dan.
Yeah, I've already in this race, and I hate to after time price, but I back Valdez at slightly bigger than he is at the moment, so I do think he's about the right price now, and I think it's Trifolium who boasts just about the best form. I think he's the most solid conveyance of the market leaders and those at single figure prices. He'll put in a clear round. He too has been to a festival before, third in Cinders and Ashes Supreme, and I hope that sort of experience can stand him in good stead because, yeah, he's got all the hallmarks of a horse that will go well in this race.
That's Dan Barber's thoughts on the Arkle Chase on the Tuesday afternoon. Keep it right here on attheraces.com for the very best by way of Cheltenham Festival build-up.